The Marionette Men. It started the night the power went out. Just a flicker at first, almost ordinary, until everything died at once. My apartment was swallowed by darkness, and in that silence, I heard the faint click of wood against wood, a rhythm too precise to be accidental. I froze. The sound came again, closer this time, echoing down the hall, across the floors. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but the tapping became deliberate, controlled, like a metronome set to someone else's heartbeat. The next day, neighbors whispered. Cords missing, wires cut, strings left tangled across doorways. No signs of forced entry, no stolen valuables, just evidence that someone had been inside, moving through homes with careful precision. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the floor, every sigh of the building made me flinch. Then I saw them, or rather, sensed them. Shadows stiff and angular, moving in a strange, jerky rhythm. Arms bent at unnatural angles, heads tilted too far to the side, every movement synchronized. I backed away from the window. The lights flickered. When they returned, the shapes vanished, leaving only silence and attention that pressed against my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, even when I told myself the shapes were gone. The following blackout was longer. I counted the seconds, every heartbeat amplified. Then I heard it, soft clicks in the living room, the unmistakable rhythm of joints moving. I peered through the darkness, and in the corner, I saw their outlines. 3 figures, stiff as boards, standing perfectly in line. They didn't move toward me. They didn't speak. They only tilted their heads in unison, as though studying me, measuring my fear. The painted smiles carved into their masks, rubbery, flawless, stretched impossibly wide. I realized with a chill that there were no faces beneath, only the illusion of life. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, and for a moment, I thought I could hear strings pulling taut, whispering through the floorboards. My heart pounded as the figures creaked in rhythm, each movement deliberate, precise, and horrifyingly synchronized. I grabbed my phone. No signal. The flashlight barely penetrated the shadows, but enough to catch the glint of their masks. Painted smiles, eyes invisible, heads tilted just enough to be wrong. I whispered a prayer and froze, realizing they were not here to harm. They were here to watch, to control, to mark. Then, as quickly as they appeared, they vanished. My apartment returned to stillness, the only evidence of their presence, a single white string lying on the floor. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to know why it was there, only that it had been left intentionally as a warning or a signature. Sleep became impossible. Every creak, every tap, every whisper of the wind set my nerves on edge. When the lights flickered in the hallway, I held my breath, expecting them to appear again. The paranoia became a rhythm of its own, each day measured in heartbeats, not minutes. Neighbors told stories. One woman said she woke to find 3 of them standing over her crib, not moving, not breathing, just watching. When she screamed, they turned toward her together, heads cracking slightly in a grotesque imitation of life, then vanished in a flash of darkness. All that remained was a white string tied around the baby's wrist. I didn't have a baby. I started noticing subtle changes in my apartment. Drawers slightly open, small objects rearranged, faint scratches on the walls. Nothing that could be explained logically. The feeling of being observed never left. I began locking every door, every window, even covering the mirrors, but the tension persisted. Then the blackout came again, longer than before. I counted to myself. Each second stretched unbearably. I could hear them moving. Soft clicks, the scraping of joints, whispers that weren't words. They were inside the apartment, in the hallways, shifting in patterns too precise for human bodies. I peeked around the corner of the living room. 3 figures, stiff and angular, moved in perfect synchronization. The light from the dying street lamps fell across their masks. Perfectly painted smiles, eyes void beneath, heads tilted at impossible angles. They moved like puppets, controlled by strings I couldn't see. Every instinct told me to run, but I stayed rooted. I had to watch, to understand. My pulse thundered as one of them extended an arm in perfect alignment with the others. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The message was clear. I was part of their performance now. The lights returned, they vanished. My apartment returned to quiet, but the white string remained, curled on the floor like a snake. I didn't touch it. It was a signature, a warning, an invitation I couldn't decline. The following nights, I stayed awake, lights blazing, doors barricaded. But each blackout brought them closer, the movement of the joints, the rhythm of the heads, the stretching of masks, painted smiles glinting in darkness. I realized I could not escape their pattern. I could not unsee the rhythm. I tried telling someone, police, friends, anyone, but they laughed politely or dismissed it. Nobody believed the tales of synchronized intruders. The strings left as signatures, the painted smiles that were never human faces. The disbelief only made the nights longer, the blackouts more terrifying, the anticipation unbearable. Then I woke to it, a single string around my wrist. I didn't move. My hand twitched, a reflex of fear. Somewhere outside, I heard the clicks again, faint but unmistakable. The Marionette Men were near, watching, waiting for me to break the rhythm, to breathe, to look. I whispered to the dark, to myself, to anything that would listen. Please, don't come closer. The soft, mechanical laughter returned, layered and perfect. Their masks tilted as they moved, synchronized, stiff joints snapping faintly in the night. I realized with horror that this wasn't about harm. It wasn't about theft. It was about attention, control, observation. If you ever wake to the sound of wooden joints, don't move, don't breathe. Don't acknowledge the rhythm unless you want to be part of it. And if you want to see who's pulling the strings, open the horror box and subscribe before this feed ends. The last blackout came 2 nights ago. I sat at the window, staring at my reflection in the dark glass. I counted every second, my heartbeat matching the cadence of their steps. And when the power returned, I didn't see them, but I felt them. The white string had moved. It was now draped across the edge of my bed, as though waiting for me to follow it. I don't sleep anymore. I just wait. And I know, eventually, I'll hear the wooden joints again. The face in the window across the hall. I moved into the building thinking it was quiet, uneventful. The hallways smelled faintly of bleach, and the neighbors rarely spoke. That is, until I noticed the face. It appeared in the window across from my apartment. At first, I thought it was a reflection or a trick of the light, but night after night, it stayed, motionless, staring, waiting. I tried ignoring it. Everyone says don't feed your paranoia, right? But the longer I looked, the harder it was to breathe. Its gaze felt personal, like it knew me. The first week, I convinced myself it was a neighbor with insomnia, a habit of standing by their window late at night. Maybe a teenager, bored, watching the hallway like a cat. Then I noticed patterns. The face didn't shift, didn't blink normally. It appeared exactly when I returned from work, always at the same moment, perfectly timed to match my routine. I started recording. My phone captured nothing at first, just the empty hallway. But if I watched the playback carefully, there it was, an outline, darker than shadow, impossibly still. One night, I stayed up deliberately, watching. As I moved from the couch to the kitchen, the face mimicked my movement. Not fully, but enough to make my stomach drop. I tried knocking on the wall, calling out, even speaking to the neighbor below me. Nothing. No answer. Just that impossible, unmoving gaze silently following me. My sleep disappeared. I started taking notes, times, distances, lighting. The figure obeyed some hidden schedule, appearing in response to my habits, but never in a place I could reach. One evening, I returned from work later than usual. The face wasn't there. Relief washed over me. Then, I glanced into my apartment mirror. Its reflection stood just behind me, slightly distorted, smiling. I spun around. Empty. Just the hallway outside. My pulse rattled in my ears. I didn't sleep that night, laying awake, staring at my door, every shadow suspicious. The next day, small things began to change. My mail was opened, rearranged. The doormat moved slightly, angled differently. Little signs, almost invisible, that someone or something was inside my life. I tried confronting the face. I opened my door, looked down the hall. Empty, no footsteps, no sound. But when I returned to my window, it appeared again, closer, darker, impossibly still. I asked a neighbor casually about the windows across the hall. They didn't know what I meant. No one lived in that apartment. It had been empty for months. Fear settled like a stone in my chest. Something lived there. Not a person. Something that could stand at a window, impossible and quiet, waiting for me to return home. The following nights were worse. Its presence seemed to seep through the walls. When I entered rooms, I felt watched, even without seeing it. Footsteps echoed faintly. Shadows fell in unnatural angles. I started sleeping with the lights on. Each night, I checked the window across the hall. Always there, watching. I began noticing its features: pale, elongated face, eyes too wide, lips slightly parted, and unervingly human. It didn't move like a person. Its head tilted at impossible angles, and sometimes I swore its expression changed when I wasn't looking, directly smiling, frowning, laughing silently. One night, it blinked, just once, and I knew, in that heartbeat, that it wasn't observing randomly. It was learning, studying, calculating every reaction. I taped cardboard over the window to block the view, hoping to end it. The next morning, the cardboard was cut perfectly to match the window frame, as if it had been removed by something delicate, precise. I began to dream of it, standing outside my apartment, staring. Its eyes followed me even in dreams, always on the periphery, a dark presence I could not escape. I left the apartment for days, hotels, friends' couches. Every time I returned, it was waiting again, in the window, exactly at the moment I passed by, like a sentinel, like it belonged there, and I was trespassing. I tried ignoring it, leaving curtains closed, lights blazing. It didn't matter. Sometimes in reflections, in the window across the street, I saw it grinning faintly, always mimicking, always patient. The breaking point came when I noticed movement in the reflection of my own window. Not a shadow, not a person, but the face, shifting, leaning forward slowly, closer than physics should allow. I reached for the window, heart hammering, but it was empty. Only the faint reflection remained. I touched the glass, cold, unbroken, but I could feel it there, staring, waiting. I packed a bag. I moved out, hoping to escape. But weeks later, I received a photo from a friend. A building across town, window dark, but faintly a face looking back. I hadn't even told anyone where I moved. The face exists everywhere. It waits for habits, observes routines, and follows in ways the mind cannot fully comprehend. Sometimes I think I can still see it in shadows, peeking through reflections, patient as ever. If you ever see a face in the window, open the horror box and subscribe. They might already be watching. I shut my eyes, but when I open them, the hallway stretches unnaturally, and I feel it's still there waiting, across the hall, just like before. The Marionette Men pulling strings in my house. It began with a faint snapping sound, like a violin string breaking in another room. The noise came at exactly 3:11 a.m. every night, sharp, delicate, deliberate. I thought it was the house settling. After 3 nights, I followed the sound. It came from the ceiling above my bedroom, rhythmic and precise, as if someone were adjusting tension on an invisible line. When I turned on the light, it stopped instantly. The next morning, I found thin marks on the ceiling plaster hairline cuts that hadn't been there before. They formed crisscross patterns, intersecting like a web of fine threads pulled too tight. I told myself it was just cracks from old paint, but the pattern grew denser each day, forming small knots in the corners where light didn't reach. When I brushed one, something snapped back, fast, invisible. By the end of the week, I began hearing footsteps above me, even though I lived on the top floor. Slow, dragging steps, followed by the faint tugging of cords and the whisper of something wooden scraping. One night, I woke to the sound of something dangling near my face, a faint tap against my cheek. When I sat up, nothing was there, but the smell of dust and old rope hung thick in the air. I checked every vent, every crawl space, nothing. But as I shone my flashlight across the walls, I saw it. Dozens of fine strings stretched from ceiling to floor, almost invisible until the light caught them. Each string vibrated slightly, as though something was breathing on the other end. I cut one with scissors. The vibration stopped, but a soft creak came from the hallway like a body shifting its weight. The next morning, I found fresh strings in the same spot, woven more tightly, connected now to the corners of my bed. I didn't touch them again. I didn't want to know what happened when they snapped. That night, I heard motion behind the wall's small rhythmic jerks, like marionette limbs clicking together. Then the sound of laughter, faint and childlike, echoing from inside the vents. I tried recording. On playback, the strings vibrated violently, though I hadn't seen them move in real life. And behind the static, a whisper, "Pull tighter." The following nights blurred together. I'd wake to the sound of footsteps above, strings tightening, walls creaking in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. I began noticing new shadows, long-limbed figures, jerking slightly as though suspended. Once, I caught one standing in my living room. It wasn't human. Its arms bent the wrong way, joints hinged unnaturally. Its head hung forward, as though attached to unseen wires above. When I moved, it moved, each twitch perfectly delayed by half a second, as if waiting for an unseen puppeteer's command. Then its hand rose, creaking, pointing upward toward the ceiling. I followed the gesture and saw more strings, hundreds running across beams, into walls, down through vents. My entire house was webbed in them. I ran outside. From the street, the house looked perfectly normal. But in the windows, faint silhouettes twitched behind the curtains, moving jerkily like mannequins being tested. I called the police. They found nothing. No signs of entry, no footprints, no strings. Just me, shaking, exhausted. They suggested stress, insomnia. I almost believed them. That night, I moved my bed to the living room. As I tried to sleep, a soft clatter echoed from the kitchenwood tapping tile. I peeked around the corner. 3 figures stood there, tall, thin, wearing masks shaped like featureless faces, their heads tilted sharply in unison. The ceiling above them swayed, strings disappearing upward into darkness. They didn't speak. They simply moved, jerking, stopping, twitching in rhythm. When one raised its hand, the others followed, like synchronized puppets dancing to a silent song. I froze, unable to breathe. The nearest one turned its head in small, clicking motions, as if gears rotated inside its neck. Its face tilted toward me, blank and searching. I whispered, "What do you want?" It tilted its head again, then lifted one hand and mimed pulling a string. My arm jerked upward, against my will. I screamed and stumbled back, cutting through invisible threads that stung against my skin. the figures didn't chase me. They simply watched, twitching, until I fled outside. I stayed at a motel that night. Still, I could feel the faint tugging in my arms when I tried to sleep, as if residual strings remained attached beneath the skin. When I returned home at dawn, the house was silent. Every room was spotless, no strings, no cracks. But the furniture had been rearranged into a perfect circle around the living room ceiling light. I stood beneath it, staring upward. Hanging, there was a single thread, swaying gently. At its end dangled a small wooden cross, the kind used to control puppets. I lifted it cautiously. The wood was warm. Then the light flickered, and I saw shadows moving on the walls again. Long, disjointed limbs, bending at impossible angles. The ceiling began to creak. Strings dropped down one by one, brushing my shoulders, wrapping loosely around my arms, my throat. I stumbled back, cutting at them, but they multiplied. I ran, but every door handle felt like it was being pulled from the other side. The whole house moved like a stage set collapsing, strings jerking everything in rhythm, guided by unseen hands. I fell, and the last thing I saw before darkness swallowed me was a pair of pale wooden feet descending the stairs, strings tightening above. When I woke, it was morning. The house was calm, but my arms ached, and faint bruises shaped like loops circled my wrists. I tried leaving. The doorknob turned with resistance, like someone gently pulling back. I don't know how long I've been here now. The lights flicker at 3:11 a.m., and I hear the faint snapping again, rhythmic as ever. Some nights, I wake standing in the middle of the room, arms raised, body swaying slightly, as if responding to commands I don't remember hearing. If you ever hear strings tightening in your house, open the horror box and subscribe. They might already be pulling yours. And sometimes, when I look up, I swear I can see the faint outline of a hand above the ceiling guiding, patient, waiting for me to move again. The night they broke into my mind, I used to think breaking in required doors, windows, or noise. The night they came, I learned it doesn't. It starts quieter than footsteps. It begins with a thought that doesn't belong to you. It was just after midnight when I felt it. A sentence forming in my head that I didn't start. Don't move. They're listening. I froze. The words weren't mine, but I heard them inside me. I turned off the TV and listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge and my heartbeat thudding too hard. Then another voice followed. Softer, female, trembling. He can hear us now. I live alone. Always have. My apartment's on the 8th floor with triple locks. No one could possibly get in. But as I stood in the dark, I felt the faint static of someone tuning through my thoughts. The voices weren't external. They were threaded through my mind, faint, tangled whispers echoing behind my own words. Every time I tried to think clearly, something answered back. I grabbed my phone to call someone, but before I could unlock it, the screen lit up with a message that wasn't from any app. We're already inside. I dropped it. The phone screen flickered like a pulse. My reflection in the black glass looked wrong, slightly delayed, like it was thinking before I was. I tried to push the thoughts out, repeating my name, my address, anything to stay grounded. But the voices began to mimic me, perfectly. Every thought I formed was instantly repeated back in the same tone, like a mirror inside my skull. My name is Aaron. My name is Aaron. My name is Aaron. Each echo a half-second too late, laughing softly by the end. I ran to the bathroom and turned on the faucet, hoping noise would drown it out. But the sound warped. The rushing water began to hum a low tune, a human hum. The melody followed the rhythm of my heartbeat. I slammed the faucet off. The hum didn't stop. It continued inside my head, vibrating through my teeth. Then I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate, except there was no upstairs. My ceiling light flickered. For a moment, shadows formed in the corners, silhouettes of heads leaning forward like they were listening. I covered my ears and whispered, "Get out." The reply came instantly, but not from the air. It came from inside. "We can't. You invited us in when you started thinking about us." The panic built like static. I couldn't tell which thoughts were mine anymore. Every image that came to mind my apartment, my face, my memories shifted slightly, like something else was editing them as I recalled them. Then came the sound of something knocking not at the door, but in my head. A dull, rhythmic thud, each one syncing with my pulse. Every time it hit, I saw Flash's hands pressed against glass, eyes peering through cracks, smiles too wide. The knocking grew louder, turning into laughter, then sobbing, then whispers again. They began describing what I was doing as I did it. "He's looking at the door. He's thinking about leaving. He's realizing there's nowhere to go." I tried to run anyway, but every step felt guided, delayed, like someone was walking for me. My arms lifted slightly on their own, like a puppet tugged by invisible strings. I stumbled into the kitchen. The lights flickered, humming faintly in time with the voices. Every appliance screen glowed with fragments of text, unfinished sentences, memories I never wrote down. On the microwave display, "Remember the basement." My building doesn't have a basement, but I remembered something: the gap beneath the floorboards in the storage room. I'd never looked beneath it. The thought wasn't mine, but I followed it. My body moved before I decided to. I pulled up the loose boards and saw a crawl space, narrow and dark, lined with mirrors facing downward. And reflected in those mirrors were faces mine. Dozens of them, staring up, blinking slightly out of sync. Behind them, faint silhouettes moved taller, sharper, wrong. Then one of my reflections spoke. Its mouth opened slowly. "You're late." I fell backward, hitting the floor. The mirrors below trembled, and all the reflections began to smile in unison. The whispering rose into a chorus. "He knows now. He knows now. He knows now." The light shattered. When it came back, I was standing somehow back in my living room. My clock read 3:33 a.m. I don't remember walking there. The apartment looked untouched, perfect. No voices, no strings, just quiet. Then my phone buzzed. A new message appeared. We left the door open. The front door was ajar. Outside, the hallway was pitch black except for one flickering light halfway down. The shadows along the walls twitched, bending toward me like something behind them was pressing forward. I shut the door and locked it 3 times. Then came the whisper, "Locks only keep you in." The walls seemed to breathe after that. Paint rippled, shapes pressing from beneath, like fingers testing the surface. My reflection in the TV turned toward me on its own and mouthed, "It's almost time." I screamed, threw a blanket over the screen, and ran to my room. I wrote everything down, every word, every sound, hoping if I recorded it, it would stay external. But even now, as I write, my handwriting changes halfway through sentences. There's a pattern in it, like someone else's rhythm is seeping through the ink. If I stop writing, the whispers start again. They hum inside my skull, repeating the same phrase. "We didn't break in. You broke open." The next thing I know, hours pass. It's dawn. The light outside is wrong gray, stretched, like it's refracted through water. My phone rings. The screen says my own name. I answer. On the other end, I hear my own voice whisper, "We're coming back tonight." Now it's dark again. It's always dark when they arrive. Every light in the house flickers in rhythm, like the beat of a thought I didn't have. I keep the pen moving. I keep pretending I'm the one thinking these words. But sometimes I can feel their thoughts blending into mine, tightening around the edges. And when the clock hits 3:11 a.m., I stop fighting. Because the truth is, I can't tell where I end and they begin anymore. If you ever feel someone in your thoughts, don't think back. Don't let them hear you. And don't forget to open the horror box before they open you. The Clockwork robbers. The first time I heard the ticking, I thought it was the radiator in the hallway. Steady, mechanical, growing louder with every heartbeat. At exactly 12:07 a.m., it stopped. Silence pressed down so heavy, I felt it in my chest. The next night, Mrs. Kent vanished. Her grandson said he heard metal footsteps before the power flickered out. When the lights returned, every clock in her home was gone. On the kitchen table, a single brass gear gleamed in the faint moonlight. Neighbors whispered about costume thieves at first. Masks, gloves, synchronized steps. But when you heard the ticking, it wasn't costumes anymore. It was alive, mechanical, patient, deliberate. They didn't want money. They wanted time itself. The week after, it came to my apartment. I woke to a faint click, click, click. Rhythmic, precise. My pulse synchronized with it. I followed the sound, heart hammering, into the living room. The air felt wrong, electric thick, as if holding its breath. 3 figures stood in front of the grandfather clock. Porcelain masks covered their faces, painted with wide, unnerving smiles. Dark coats buttoned to the neck, gloved hands perfectly still. On their backs, brass wind-up keys turned slowly, endlessly, ticking in harmony. They didn't move toward me. They didn't speak. They only stood, listening, perfectly synchronized, every joint clicking mechanically. I realized then that time itself had been invaded, and I was nothing more than an observer. The leader stepped closer. The ticking grew louder, sharper, resonating in the walls. My pulse echoed each click, a drum of fear. Then all 3 turned backward, moving in unison toward the door. They didn't open it. They passed through it as though it weren't solid. When they were gone, my phone blinked 12:07 a.m. Every clock in my apartment had vanished. An hour of my life disappeared. My daughter's birthday reminder was erased. Photos, conversations, memories, all rewritten, subtly altered, gone without explanation. The police didn't believe me. They called it stress, imagination, sleep deprivation. One officer glanced at his wristwatch halfway through my story and frowned. His watch had stopped at 12:07. When he stood, a brass gear fell from his sleeve. He didn't notice it. Disappearances began across the city, always between 12 o'clock and 12:10. No forced entry, no robbery, just time erased. Witnesses swore the figures glided, their joints clicking, wind-up keys turning, movements impossible for any human body. They weren't stealing objects. They were stealing hours, fragments of life. I tried to record the ticking. Every attempt failed. Audio files corrupted. Cameras captured only shadows. Silver reflections of their keys spinning. One man claimed he saw his reflection pulled backward into a mirror by them, a lag in his own movements that never fully corrected. My apartment became a stage. Every blackout brought subtle rearrangements. Rugs rotated slightly, chairs moved, items misplaced in ways I didn't notice at first. Every time I returned from a short walk, the space felt off, rehearsed, unnatural. I tried to block the windows, cover mirrors, keep clocks hidden. It didn't matter. They always arrived at 12:07. Their metallic whispers, the soft gear clicks, footsteps that weren't quite footsteps, all waited outside, patient and inevitable. One night, I sat perfectly still, pretending to sleep. The ticking returned outside my bedroom door, soft, mechanical, omnipresent. Metallic brushes against the handle. Click, click, click. My pulse matched it. Shadows moved. The keys spun faster, louder, filling the room with rhythm I could not escape. They didn't touch me. They measured me, timed me, assessed my hours. The leader stepped forward and gently tapped my wristwatch. It froze instantly. When I blinked, the figures were gone. 12:07. Perfect. Ruthless. endless. The next morning, a brass gear appeared on my pillow, polished, small, ticking from within. Every clock in my apartment ran differently. My phone displayed wrong dates. Digital timers reversed. Even reflections in mirrors lagged slightly behind my movements. Reality itself seemed slightly undone. Every night at 12:07, I hear the wind-up keys outside my door. Mechanical precision. I stay as still as possible, barely breathing, watching for the moment when they might step through my walls. Every shadow could be one of them. Every tick, a warning. I began keeping a log. Hours written meticulously, noted every minute. Every night, pages vanished or changed. One night, in my own handwriting, a sentence appeared I didn't write. Stop watching the clock. Time warped around them. Half-finished sentences, meals eaten but unremembered. Days that ended before they should. The apartment felt like it was slowly rewinding itself, while I remained tethered to the forward motion of fear. Neighbors began leaving. They fled the 12:07 hour, avoiding anything with a clock, a reflection, or a ticking sound. Houses were abandoned, streets emptied at midnight. I stayed because I had nowhere else, because they knew where I was. The ticking is patient, persistent. It creeps into every corner. My mind begins to echo it, a second tick behind, then another, until my heartbeat is nothing but a metronome. And every time the blackout ends, everything looks normal. Too normal. Rearranged, polished, perfect. The gear left behind gleams silently, a promise that they'll return. I try to stay awake, light every lamp, hide every reflective surface, but I know it's not enough. They measure your awareness, your fear, and the patience to endure their rhythm. If you ever hear that soft mechanical clicking, don't check your phone. Don't look at clocks. Don't speak. Don't move. Just wait. And if the ticking stops, it may already be too late. They steal more than hours. They steal pieces of reality, pieces of you. If you like stories that play with time, keep your clock set to halfway dark, and before your hours vanish completely, subscribe.